The ambush you keep your schedule full. There is always something to do, something to fix, somewhere to be. And when by chance a moment of silence appears, you grab your phone. You put on a podcast. You turn on the television. Anything, as long as you don't have to sit still with your own thoughts. You react in ways you don't understand. Someone does something small, and you feel a disproportionate irritation, an anger that doesn't match the situation. Sabotage things that were going well. A relationship, an opportunity, a good phase of your life. And when you tried to understand why, you found no answer. This is not bad luck. This is not anxiety without cause. This is not a lack of emotional control. This is a pursuit. Something is chasing you. And the faster you run, the closer it gets. You are not being chased by life. You are being chased by yourself. Story about themselves. A version. I am a calm person. I am someone who doesn't hold grudges. I am not like my father. I am not that kind of person. And they believe it completely. Because the story is consistent, it has been rehearsed for years, and almost everyone around them has accepted it as true. But then something happens. A comment from someone they love cuts deeper than it should. A promotion goes to someone else and they feel something ugly rising inside them, something they don't want to name. A person they barely know irritates them for reasons they cannot rationally justify. And for a fraction of a second, before the mind closes the door again, they catch a glimpse of something that doesn't fit the story. That glimpse is the truth knocking. Carl Jung spent decades studying the architecture of the human mind, and one of the things he understood with absolute clarity is this: the self you present to the world, the version you have curated, defended, and identified with, is not your whole self. It is a construction. A necessary one, but a construction nonetheless. Jung called it the persona. The mask. Not a lie exactly, but a selection. You took certain parts of yourself, the parts that were accepted, praised, rewarded, and you built an identity around them. And the parts that were inconvenient, that made people uncomfortable, that were punished or shamed, you pushed down. Out of sight. Out of the story. The problem is that what you push down does not disappear. It does not dissolve. It does not quietly accept its exile. It goes underground and it keeps moving, and it starts shaping your behavior in ways your conscious mind cannot see or control. You think you know yourself because you know your preferences, your habits, your opinions. But knowing what coffee you like and what politics you support is not self-knowledge. Self-knowledge is being able to look at your worst reaction on your worst day and understand exactly where it came from. And almost no one can do that. Not honestly. The person you think you are is the surface. What Jung found beneath it changes everything. NG's shadow. Not what you think it is. When most people hear the word shadow, they imagine the worst version of themselves, the violent impulse, the darkest thought, the thing they would never say out loud. And because of that image, they assume the shadow is something to be feared, contained, or eliminated. That is exactly the misunderstanding that keeps people trapped. The shadow is not your worst self. It is your most honest self. It is not a collection of evil impulses waiting to destroy you. It is every part of you that was never given permission to exist. Your anger, that was called aggression. Your ambition, that was called arrogance. Your grief, that was called weakness. Your need for space, that was called selfishness. Your sexuality, your hunger for power, your capacity for cruelty, your desire to be seen, all of it pushed into the dark not because it was wrong, but because it was inconvenient for the people who shaped you. Jung was precise about this. The shadow forms in childhood, not through trauma alone, but through the ordinary, daily process of being told who you are allowed to be. Every time a child is punished for expressing something real, that thing gets buried. Every time a feeling is met with shame instead of understanding, it goes underground. By the time a person reaches adulthood, they are carrying an entire hidden self that has never seen the light, and they have no idea it is there. Now here is where it gets uncomfortable. That buried material does not stay passive, it leaks. It surfaces in the moments you least expect and least control. It comes out in the rage that appears from nowhere, in the attraction to people who are completely wrong for you, in the sudden impulse to destroy something that is going well, in the way certain people make your skin crawl without any rational justification. And this is the part that most people never hear about: the shadow. The traits you cannot tolerate in other people are almost always the traits you have refused to acknowledge in yourself. Think about that carefully. The person who infuriates you with their arrogance, have you ever considered that the part of you that was never allowed to take up space is watching them do it freely? And something in you cannot stand the sight of your own buried desire walking around in someone else's body? The person whose neediness repulses you, could it be that you buried your own need for connection so deeply that witnessing it in someone else feels like an accusation? Projection is not a metaphor. It is a psychological mechanism. You take what you cannot face inside yourself and you place it outside, onto others, and then you react to it there with the full force of everything you have suppressed. Jung said it directly: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The shadow does not weaken you by existing. Every human being has one. It weakens you exclusively by being ignored. Because what you refuse to see in yourself, you will never be able to control. The mechanics of running knowing the shadow exists is not enough, because the mind is extraordinarily skilled at avoiding it, not through obvious denial, not through dramatic repression, but through mechanisms so subtle and so socially acceptable that most people never recognize them as escape routes at all. There are 3 ways people run, and at least one of them is going to feel like a personal accusation. The first is over-identification with a persona. This is the person who has built their entire identity around a single self-image and will defend it at any cost. The one who is always calm, the one who is always strong, the one who is always the reasonable one in the room. On the surface, this looks like emotional maturity. It looks like discipline. It looks admirable. But what is actually happening is that this person has fused so completely with a curated version of themselves that any evidence to the contrary becomes a psychological threat. They do not suppress their anger. They genuinely stop being able to feel it. They do not choose patience. They have simply lost access to the part of them that knows how to be honest about what they are actually experiencing. And when life eventually cracks that persona, and it always does, the collapse is devastating precisely because the identity was built on exclusion rather than integration. The second mechanism is chronic busyness as a defense. And this one is dangerous because the culture rewards it. The person who is always productive, always optimizing, always in motion, always building something. From the outside, they look driven. From the inside, stillness is the enemy. Because stillness means silence. And silence means the thing underneath gets loud. This is not laziness dressed up as ambition. This is terror dressed up as discipline. The moment the calendar clears, the anxiety spikes. Not because there is nothing to do, but because there is something to feel, and they have spent years making sure they never have to feel it. The third mechanism is the one Jung considered the most revealing of all, the repeating pattern. The same relationship that ends the same way, the same dynamic with a different person wearing a different face, the same argument that surfaces in every close connection you have ever had, the same ceiling you hit every time something good starts to build. You change the circumstances. You change the city, the partner, the job. And somehow, the same story keeps being written. Most people explain this as bad luck, as a pattern of attracting the wrong people, as the world being against them. Jung had a different explanation. What you refuse to integrate inside yourself, life will keep presenting to you on the outside. The shadow does not wait patiently. It manufactures situations that force the encounter you have been avoiding. It will keep sending the same lesson in different packaging until you stop long enough to read it. The pattern is not your enemy. The pattern is the most honest communication your unconscious knows how to make. It is not punishing you. It is pointing at something you have not been willing to look at yet. And the longer you keep running, the more elaborate the pointing becomes. The Stoic cut, so now you know what is chasing you. You know it has a name. You know how it moves and how it hides. And the question that is sitting in your chest right now is the only question that actually matters. What do you do with it? This is where Jung hands you the map and the Stoics hand you the compass. Because Jung tells you what is happening inside you with extraordinary precision. He shows you the architecture of the problem. But the Stoics understood something Jung's framework demands and rarely states directly. Insight without discipline is just sophisticated suffering. Knowing the name of what is chasing you changes nothing if you keep running in the same direction. Marcus Aurelius never used the word shadow, but he wrote about the internal obstacle with a clarity that cuts through centuries. He understood that the impediment is not outside. The thing standing between you and a functional, grounded life is not the circumstances, not the people, not the timing. It is the unexamined material inside you that keeps interpreting everything through the lens of its own wounds. Epictetus never sat in a Jungian therapy session, but he identified the same fundamental division that Jung would map 2,000 years later. There are things within your control and things outside of it. And what Epictetus was pointing at when he made that distinction was not just external events. He was pointing at the chaos of an unexamined inner life and saying, you are suffering because you are treating your own unconscious reactions as if they were reality itself. Here is how these two traditions meet inside a single moment of your actual life. You cannot control what surfaces from your shadow. You cannot decide that the anger will not rise, that the jealousy will not appear, that the old wound will not ache when something touches it. That material exists. It will move. Trying to control its existence is exactly the kind of battle that exhausts people for decades without resolution. What you can control is what you do in the moment after it surfaces. Whether you collapse into it and let it drive, whether you suppress it and pretend it did not happen, or whether you stop, look directly at it, and ask with the full force of your rational mind, what is this actually about, and what part of me is speaking right now? That pause, that fraction of a second between the reaction and the response, is where the Stoic practice lives. And it is also, not coincidentally, exactly where Jung said integration begins. Not in a therapist's office. Not in a weekend retreat. In the ordinary, unglamorous moment when something uncomfortable surfaces and you choose to look at it instead of away from it. The obstacle is the path. Not as a motivational phrase, as a precise psychological instruction. The integration is the word that gets used the most and understood the least. They picture a version of themselves that has processed everything, healed everything, and arrived at a permanent state of inner peace. That is not what integration is. And that fantasy is itself another form of running. Integration is not a destination. It is a practice. It is the daily, unglamorous, sometimes uncomfortable discipline of refusing to lie to yourself about what you are actually experiencing. It does not require a therapist, a ceremony, or a crisis. It requires honesty, repeated, in small moments, over a long time. Here is what it looks like in real life. A man named Daniel has spent 37 years being the person who holds everything together. In his family, in his friendships, in his relationships. He is the one people call. He is the one who does not break down. He built his entire identity around being needed, being reliable, being the one who does not need anything back. And he is proud of it in the way people are proud of things that are actually armor. One evening, his partner tells him she feels disconnected from him, that she does not know what he actually feels about anything, that living with him sometimes feels like living with someone who is performing contentment rather than experiencing it. And something in Daniel snaps, not into sadness, into rage. A cold, disproportionate, frightening rage that shocks them both. He leaves the room. And for the first time in 37 years, instead of suppressing what just happened or explaining it away, he sits with it. He does not reach for his phone. He does not make himself busy. He stays inside the discomfort long enough to ask the question, where did that come from? And what surfaces, slowly, painfully, is not the answer he expected. What surfaces is grief. Years of unacknowledged need. Years of giving without ever allowing himself to receive. Years of performing strength so consistently that he forgot he was performing. The rage was not about his partner's words. The rage was the shadow finally loud enough to be heard, because she had accidentally described exactly what he had done to himself. That moment, that single moment of honest self-examination in an ordinary, just the decision to look at what is there instead of running from it one more time. What happens after that moment is not comfortable. Daniel does not feel peaceful. He feels exposed. He feels the particular chaos of a person whose carefully constructed identity has just developed a crack, wide enough to see through. And that feeling, that exposure, that loss of the familiar armor is exactly what most people interpret as proof that looking inward was a mistake. It is not a mistake. It is the beginning. Jung was direct about this. He said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, not because what you find is monstrous, but because what you find is human, fully, uncomfortably, undeniably human. And a person who has spent years performing a curated version of themselves finds the raw, unedited truth of their own inner life, and honesty, for people who have been hiding, feels like chaos before it feels like freedom. The chaos is not a sign that something is wrong. The chaos is the sound of something real replacing something constructed. It is supposed to feel like that. That is exactly what it is supposed to feel like. The practice is simple, even when it is hard. When something disproportionate surfaces, you pause. You do not perform. You do not suppress. You ask what part of you is actually speaking, and you stay with the answer long enough for it to tell you the truth. You do this once. Then you do it again. Then again. Not because it gets easier immediately, but because each time you choose to look, the thing chasing you loses a little ground. Not because it disappears, because you stop giving it the power that only invisibility provides. The only question that matters: you came into this video carrying something you probably did not have a name for. A restlessness. A pattern you could not break. A version of yourself that kept showing up in moments you did not choose and could not control. Now you have the name. Now you understand the mechanism. And that changes your position completely, because ignorance was the only protection the shadow ever had. The question is not whether your shadow exists. It does. Every person listening to this has one. The question is not whether it has been affecting your life. It has. You have seen the evidence in your own reactions, your own patterns, your own repeating story. The only question, the one that actually separates the people who change from the people who spend the rest of their lives running, is whether you are willing to turn around. Not to fix everything at once. Not to become a different person by tomorrow. Just to stop. To be still long enough to face what has been following you. To give it the honest attention it has been demanding through every disproportionate reaction, every repeating pattern, every moment of sabotage you could never explain. Jung said that what you resist persists, and what you face finally, after years of running, does not destroy you. It frees you. The running ends the moment you decide it does, and that decision is yours. It always was.